are going to make a lot of money.
Do you reckon that's the conversation that went down in the Sony executive offices when they decided to greenlight this thing? You know, the term remake and reboot has more become a term that's immediately followed by movie fans rolling their eyes nowadays. Occasionally there's some sense in the decision, usually when the first try didn't pan out very well, or if there's someone who sees an opportunity to take the concept and do something new and fresh with it. But most of the time it's Hollywood trying to cash in on a familiar franchise because slapping the right words in the title brings in an audience. Sometimes it works out. I think the reason movies like Dredd and Batman Begins work so well is because they're films that take that concept and tell new stories with the material available instead of trying to remake the original films with the same story. And they also spawned out of creative filmmakers wanting to make these movies as opposed to a studio greenlighting a reboot just because it sells and then building the film from then onwards. The original RoboCop is considered a classic by many film fans. A thrilling and extreme science fiction film about a cop named Alex Murphy living in a future of unstoppable crime wherein he's shot to death by a gang of ruthless thugs and gets turned into RoboCop. Half man, half machine, all badass. The film was universally recognised for its well-portrayed hero, amazing visuals, political commentary and social satire undertones, and for overall just being a really smart and well-executed movie about a robot rediscovering his humanity. So naturally when the reboot was announced, yeah, people were less than thrilled and I can't exactly blame them. The original will always be around and nothing will change that, but where films like Total Recall are also viewed as being untouchable, there's at least reason behind projects like that, considering the original deviated from the book, which means there's unexplored material available to pull from. But RoboCop was just a film that, by all intent and purposes, was perfectly fine the way it was, and no one was asking for a second try. Sony have been sneaky. They're calling this a reboot when it's not. A reboot is when you take the concept and do something new and fresh with it. Dredd was a reboot. It didn't retell the storyline from the original 1995 film, they went their own way with it. RoboCop, however, is a remake. It doesn't take the concept of RoboCop and go down a path of unexplored territory. It, for the most part, follows the same plot from the original but with a few tweaks. I personally think this is where they went wrong, because RoboCop is unsurprisingly pretty bad. I try to approach films like this with an open mind, and I ask, does it work as a movie on its own merits, as well as, does it work as a remake? I was really hoping this film would surprise me, because I'd started hearing pretty favourable reviews for it, so I went into it not really knowing what to expect. Well, it plays out just as everyone expected it to, and I don't understand why people who've seen the film are now saying this is better than expected. I guess it might have something to do with the fact that everyone complained about it before it came out, to the point where they just figured it'd be boring to keep on complaining after they'd seen it. I don't really know, but I am confused at the positive response. I went into this thinking, if it's bad, I'll at least get some fun out of it, because how can a film about a cyborg supercop not be fun? But I was personally shocked how dull this was in its execution. But okay, let's look at what the film excels at. Everything besides the script is pretty damn good. This film looks fantastic. There's awesome set pieces throughout the entire flick, making it really nice to look at. The special effects are dazzling with some nice design work which pay homage to the designs from the original and makes them look a bit shinier and sleeker, so it does look like a believable technologically advanced future, and props to this film for being the first to have a robotic arm look believable. This is also a really cool cast with well-known actors such as Samuel L. Jackson, Michael Keaton and Gary Oldman, who just steals every scene he's in, and actually brings a lot of needed personality to his character. The only casting choice I had a problem with was unfortunately Joel Kinnaman, who brings no enthusiasm, personality or authority to the role of Alex Murphy or RoboCop. Perhaps they were going for a more everyday man aspect to the character this time round, but he looks really uncomfortable in the role and I wouldn't even dare compare him to Peter Weller's performance, that just makes the guy look awful. The appearance of RoboCop is also lacking in originality and believability. The original suit is still gorgeous. The way that it and Weller's performance complemented each other made it look flawlessly convincing. This thing is eye-rollingly generic, it looks rubber and cheap more than anything else, and even the silver suit doesn't hold a candle to the original, and Kinnaman doesn't put much of any effort into his physical performance, so it's a huge step backwards. The action sequences are competently shot for the most part, however these scenes are quite dull. The few that are in the film consist of RoboCop shooting people with his stun gun, while the director tries to cover up the fact that he's shooting people. For some strange reason in one scene, there was a random explosion every time he shot someone. Why? And it's quite obvious when he's walking around shooting people, it's Joel Kinnaman in the suit, and when he's jumping around and running really fast, it's a CGI model. The film, however, has a couple of great standout scenes where RoboCop is first awakened, and Alex is having to come to terms with what he's been transformed into now. These scenes were where the film had the balls to be a little more creative than original, and in fact gave us the best scene in the entire flick between Ullman and Kinnaman, which felt like it was from a completely different, better movie. But a stellar cast and stunning imagery only gets the film so far. Forgetting about comparisons, as an innocent, harmless little science fiction action movie on its own, it's fucking boring. In an attempt to justify remaking the classic, change is made for change's sake, which means we've got a really awkwardly put together script, and this completely lets the film down. In the original, the origin of RoboCop, aka his construction, is done in about 3 minutes. They turn him on and he gets to work. The character's arc, however, is essentially a robot rediscovering his humanity, right? But here they have no idea what they want to do differently from the original, and so they spend a stupid amount of time on his origin. At one point he's ordinary Alex Murphy in the suit, then at one point he's a robot when in combat and a human every other time, and then they fuck with his mind so much that he becomes the no-nonsense, straight-talking RoboCop that we know from the original by accident. Problem is, the writers have wasted so much time constantly changing their minds on what they want this guy to be, that by the time they finally settle on him being normal RoboCop, we're over halfway through the fucking film. So he only remains this way for about 10 minutes, and then after one scene where he stops at his house, he's back to being human again. I was stunned how poorly this was done, considering the only place you have to look to see how it's done right is in the original. This film seems so distracted with its own meaning and subtext that instead of trusting the audience to catch on and figure it all out themselves, whilst giving us a thrilling story with fun characters, it spends its whole runtime having RoboCop not being in control of the situation, while every character sits in a chair explaining what's happening to him and the philosophical implications of everything they're doing to him. It's so boring, and instead of exploring these ideas, the film just kinda goes, oh hey, corporations, they're kinda bad, aren't they? Oh hey, they're messing around with his mind, that's kinda unethical, isn't it? And the film doesn't even come to a conclusion on what it all means, or what Alex Murphy gains from this experience, if anything. After having his brain messed about by a bunch of people, he kinda snaps back into humanity and kills the bad guy, and that's kind of it, the end. In this version, Murphy becomes RoboCop in a different way, and you don't need that extreme use of violence to tell this version of the story, so the loss of the R rating doesn't exactly hurt the film, but the lack of a clear villain really does. Instead of giving us charismatic, memorable bad guys, it just kinda points fingers at people that might be bad, like the employees of Omnicorp that are basically just assholes, one guy that seems like a Clarence Boddicker type figure, but we find out nothing about him, and a few criminals that RoboCop takes out anyway, so I guess they're not important. There's also a subplot about the police being corrupt, but the film forgets about it come the third act. It's also unclear as to whether Omnicorp are behind his accident, or if it's just some random thug in the street that felt like bombing a car. I'll give credit to the filmmakers for at least attempting to recreate the social satire from the original, where this time they're more going for a Fox News type of thing, but where in the original they have a sense of humour with it and trust you to catch on to the propaganda itself, this one just kinda has Samuel L. Jackson yelling at the camera being so obvious and humorless that it misses the entire point of it. If I were watching this guy, I'd see right through him. He's not being subtle, he's shouting at me to think a certain way. The only other idea that the film hints at is his family, which people will know wasn't explored much in the original, and for good reasons, but I was interested to see where they'd take this. But as it stands, Alex Murphy's wife spends the entire film crying and expressing concern for him and just comes off as bland. His son doesn't get much attention, and in a really awkwardly handled move, the script contrives a way for them to sorta be in danger during the final confrontation, and then the way they wrap up that story is extremely anticlimactic. I'm guessing because they're trying to make you want to go see the dozens of sequels they'll undoubtedly milk out of this. The family focus really should have been where the reboot got its feet off the ground, to actually say, this one explores something different from the original and it's well done, but nothing interesting is done with it. This film is just so unfocused. Without any clear idea of character arcs, story or themes, and horrible pacing, it doesn't so much play out as it does feel like a list of things that just keep on happening. It lacks those natural story beats that carry an audience through a film. And considering this is the more serious and humorless version of the original, that's just boring in and of itself. RoboCop could have excelled as an actual reboot, where the concept was taken in a different direction, where someone creative saw an opportunity to tell a fresh story and took it. But as it stands, as a movie on its own, it's awkwardly boring and dumb, and as a remake, it pales in comparison to the original. Yeah, I'm gonna say it. RoboCop didn't and never will need remaking. The only thing that will have advanced or changed is the technology and the effects. I think me seeing the original only last year and loving the film as much as I do now says something. The characters, story, political and social commentary, the script, that's all timeless. It doesn't matter when you watch it, and it never will. So the fact that they made a remake and packaged it as a reboot just leads me to think that the only reason they put this into production was because sticking the name RoboCop in a title would pull in an audience to see it. I'm amazed people are saying the Total Recall remake sucked, but this one is surprisingly good. Total Recall's script wasn't as good, and it also failed to understand what worked about the original, but I have to give credit where due. It was a hugely entertaining film that powered on through like a fun ride, because the action was well executed and the director understood how to carry an audience through a film. Did it work as a remake? No. Did it work as its own film? For the most part, yeah. This is just boring. So yeah, it sucks. Don't bother. Cheers for watching, guys, and as always, if you like this video, you can subscribe to my channel.